Me. All right. It is 6:31 and I'm calling to order the District 3 Advisory Board for March 3rd, 2021. Welcome to everyone participating on Zoom or Facebook. First of all, has everyone had a chance to look at tonight's agenda? Are there questions or additions? I do know that we'll need to have a motion to add in the public agenda after our staff reports that didn't get inserted back in. So
I'm going to make a motion that we approve the agenda.
I will second.
With the insertion of the public
Yes,
agenda?
with the insertion. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you. And we have a second there. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. All right, the agenda is approved. We do have to approve the minutes from both of our meetings in February. So has everyone had a chance, firstly, to look at our February 3rd District Advisory Board minutes? And do we have any corrections or additions to those? Okay. If not, I will take a motion to approve those minutes from February 3rd.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All right, so we have a motion to approve our February 3rd minutes. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Great, motion carries. Then we also need to look at the minutes from our special council vacancy meeting on Wednesday, February 9th. Does anyone have any corrections or additions for those minutes? Okay. Seeing no corrections, I'll take a motion to approve those minutes from February 9th.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Should Jared and I be abstaining from this vote since we didn't really participate in the meeting as participants? Maddie?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I wouldn't worry.
I'm gonna abstain at
Okay.
any rate because I'm not sure that I should be part of approving those minutes. Thank you.
Okay, yep, sounds good.
I guess I should abstain also. I thought this was the special meeting from, I thought this was our first special meeting. I apologize. So I'll abstain.
Okay, thank you. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. All those opposed, same sign. Okay, and then we have the 2 abstentions. All right. Now we'll move on to staff reports. So Wichita Police Department, if you would like to go first.
Yeah, I'll go first. I'm Officer Secrets. I'm from the Southside Community Policing Team. I cover 24B, which, if you're not familiar, it's basically Harry to 235, where it goes east-west behind South High, and then Broadway to the river is basically the boundaries for my beat. On South Side, we have a lot of things going on. May 1st, we're having an event called Brush Up Broadway. And if anybody wants this information, I can send on an email and it can be distributed however, but it's May 1st. It basically covers Kellogg to Pawnee all along Broadway on both sides. And then the boundary street, just a few boundary streets to the east and west. It's an event to beautify Broadway. There will be covering up graffiti with paint, picking up trash, things of that nature all along Broadway, like I said, from Kellogg to Pawnee.
Yep.
And that way we can try to try to clean up that area, get the riffraff out of there. During the months of March and April, the Broadway corridor team is really going to be hammering that area pretty hard to try to get the unnecessary individuals out of there that don't belong. And then we will wrap it up with this this Broadway brush up, or brush up Broadway, however you want to put it. Again, that's May 1st, starts at 9 a.m. Like I said, I can forward that email to whoever so that they can distribute it however they wish. Another thing Southside's doing is we're starting an abandoned home project. This stems from the shooting that the officers were involved in the other day, where the 3 officers were injured. We're going to be identifying abandoned homes throughout all of Southside. We're going to come up with, we haven't had our initial meeting yet, but we're going to come up with some ideas on how to deal with those and hold those homeowners responsible for just letting their homes sit empty and not deal with them. We're finding a lot of homes on Southside that the homeless are getting into, and they're either sleeping in them, making them their own homes basically. And we're finding that we're having a lot of issues with homeowners who basically just don't want to deal with the house for whatever reason, the condition that it's in. So we're going to come up with that project, and we're having our initial meeting hopefully this next week to come up with some ideas on how to combat those abandoned homes and get those taken care of. I don't have a whole lot of stats as far as Southside goes, but if anybody has any questions, I'm open for those.
I actually do have a question. This is Daisy. So with as far as like the holding the homeowners responsible, we have rental properties, and by we, I mean my mother.
Sure.
And it's not that one, at least in our case, it's not that you want to allow anybody to live that's homeless or they break in. In my case, I've had tenants who have a girlfriend that comes to live with them, and then they're dealing drugs or prostitution. So
Sure.
I'm just kind of concerned with like, okay, you can, because that puts a burden as an owner. You have to pay to get the person evicted. You have to get your attorney, and it takes time. So, it's what I just more so of a consideration that I understand, but
The homes that I'm particularly talking about are ones that sit empty for 1, 2, 3 years or whatever. And then the homeless find out about them. They break in, they vandalize them. They just start living in them however they please. Those are the homes I'm talking about. I'm not talking about where somebody is renting a home and then they allow someone else to move in.
Gotcha.
That's a totally different issue.
Gotcha. So as a neighbor, if I see a home that's been vacant for some time and I see random people, I mean, are you encouraging us to call and say, hey, this is what
Yes,
we're
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you can contact any of the, if it's an emergency, obviously call and contact 911, but if it's something that is not, or you don't feel that is an emergency, you can call any of the substations.
Gotcha.
And give the address, and then they can forward that on to the community policing officer for that area.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Richard, go ahead and unmute if you want.
Thanks. Officer Sechrist, this
sir.
sounds like an interesting project. I wonder if you would be able to have a member of WIN involved in that discussion of planning an approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be awesome.
Yes. Who can I contact for that and get that organized? And
I can give you my number and yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Do you want to give it now, or I can give you my email address? However you want to do that.
Yeah, or I could give it to you in the chat.
Sure, that'll work.
Okay.
Yeah, wind doesn't really work that good for Hilltop area. Your best bet on that is to find stricter punishment, I guess you'd call it that, for the landlords that allow that to happen.
Right. Yeah.
In our neighborhood, it's a constant problem.
Yeah.
I do encourage calling the police because I do it, but please remember that there's going to be repercussions. So far, I've already done it like 3 or 4 times, and I've changed tires every time I've done it.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, that's unfortunately that's something that comes with speaking out, or
It comes with
Um,
territory.
and unfortunately that's a lot of people are scared throughout the community because they don't want to speak up. They don't want to become a victim of retaliation, and it's unfortunate. It shouldn't have to be that way, but it is.
Well, and that's why I suggest, instead of getting with a foreign, and I'm not saying that they're foreign company, but they don't live in the area, so they're not as aware of what the people are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, Officer Secrets, you mind if I jump in on a second?
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
No, just in relation to, I'm Officer Manny Thompson. I'm out at Patrol East Community Policing. I hear you about the situation in reference to some of the vacant properties, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we don't victimize the victim. So you may have like Miss, I think your name was Miss Oliverson or Miss Oliver, says she owns some rental properties. I own quite a few, not quite a few, but I have more than a few rental properties too.
Mhm.
Sometimes, especially with COVID just passing up, you'll have some vacancies, maybe a little bit longer than what you would regularly experience. So, as we're clamping down on some of those squatters or some of those illegal trespassers, some of those people who are breaking into those houses and squatting in there, we want to make sure that those landlords or homeowners aren't. There's a fine line between victimizing the victim and and assisting them in some of those situations. The gentleman who spoke up about having like an outside agency or like a property management company kind of assist, I think that's a very fine idea. But at the same time, the landlord has to manage kind of the property managers too. So I think that's going to be a large cookie to eat by yourself. So we'll all have to help each other out on that and handling that situation. But I think that is something that does need to be addressed. And I'm hoping we can get something going out of Patrol East too on some of those beats that are in your dab. Anyways, like I said, my name is Officer Manny Thompson, community policing officer down at Patrol East. Been there for a few months. I sent a message of my business cell phone number, the 316-928-1573. So feel free to call that number or text it if you have any questions or concerns. So write that down. Or text it to get my email address if you want some, if you have personal questions or something like that, that I might be able to assist you with. I don't have a whole lot. Just a couple days ago on March 1st, this past Monday, here at Patrol East, we started a kid drive where we're taking from churches and citizens around the city. We're trying to obtain new socks, new underwear, new or lightly used shoes or blankets. And we're accepting those items out at Patrol East and the front portion of it. There's 2 big boxes we have set up, but like I said, we started that on March 1st and we'll be doing this until April 16th. Patrol East lobby is open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. If you come across any items like that you'd be able to donate, we'd appreciate that. Down on 32 beat, I believe a portion of 32 beat goes into DAB 3. On April 3rd, I know they're doing a Dear Neighborhood Ministries are going to be doing an Easter event on that Saturday, April 3rd, from 1 to 3. A bunch of us officers from Patrol East, Community Policing, and CRT, the Community Response Team, will be doing service there. They'll have 10 deals set up where kids will be able to get eggs. They'll have take home, egg baskets and stuff like that. So have a good time. We'll also have a couple mounted horses there too. When it comes to some stats, let me see. I took note of the citywide vehicle recoveries since auto thefts have been up so far this year and towards the end of last year. Let's see, since February 22nd, we've recovered 33 vehicles. I'd say a good portion of that is going to be due to the flock system that we've been using. It's been very, very helpful, not in just recovering stolen autos, but if you have burglary suspects or suspects of other crimes that are seen leaving a certain area, driving a certain type of car, we're able to get those cars identified, and that leads us to possibly getting a suspect identified. So those flock cameras have really been working wonders. They're helping us solve crime. Let me see, larceny of autos. I'm real big on this as I have quite a few apartment complexes on my beat, 36 beat, by the way. In the last 28 days for Patrol East, total, we've had 15 larceny of autos, which is down from all the months that I've been out at Patrol East. I know Patrol East Community Policing and CRT, we've been conducting a lot of follow-up in reference to auto thefts, larceny autos, burglaries, robberies, and those types of cases. And we've been arresting suspects that are associated with committing those kind of crimes to get them off the street, and to get people identified that they're with to help us fight those crimes. That's all that I have, unless anybody has any questions.
David, go ahead.
Thank you, officer. I do have a question. Obviously, this is typically weather related, but have you seen a increase of like store thefts or the brazenness of store thefts? Just today, my wife and I were out shopping out east, and we were actually walking into a store, and 3 people were running out, and then obviously the store staff was running out after them with stolen merchandise. Have you seen it because of the weather, an uptick of larcenies, and the brazenness of it?
I have not personally. I know it's very possible, and it may have more things driving it than just the weather. I do know during COVID, certain crimes were elevating in number, and other crimes were lowering because people were staying inside. I do know historically some crimes kind of they go up in number during the summertime because more people are outside. They're going out, staying out later, and stuff like that with the nice weather. So it's very possible, and it is likely, but that's not something that I can say for sure. It could be that, and it could be, a couple other things.
Okay, thank you so much.
Any other questions? If you end up having a question later, like I said, I put my number on the chat, 316-928-1573. So feel free to text that if you want to, or even call it. You can get my email address off there. If there's something that I don't know the answer to, I'll find the answer for you and get it to you. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Officer Thompson and Officer Sechrist. And if you could email that Broadway brush up information to Maddie Campbell, and then she'll get it out to us. So
It's already
I think
done.
that's great. So thank you.
Yep.
Awesome.
Thank you.
We appreciate you guys being here and
Thank you.
taking care of us.
Thank you.
All right, everybody have a good night and stay safe and enjoy this warm weather we're finally starting to get.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll move on to the Wichita Fire Department.
All right, can you hear me? All right,
Yeah.
Battalion Chief Scott Kleinschmidt. I have some stats for you for District 3. These are incident numbers, but these are obviously going to be from January because we still have a few more days before we get the February numbers. So we'll have February next month for you. In January, there were 704 total incidents that fire crews responded to in District 3. 103 of those were service alarms where we were just assisting someone who, it wasn't necessarily an emergency, but they needed help and we were assisting them. 561 were medical in nature. and 40 were fire alarms. And when we say fire alarms, that could be anything from a vehicle fire to a structure fire to grass fire and everything in between. Actual numbers for February with fires, and this is the FIU, or the Fire Investigations Unit report. These are the fires that they actually came out and investigated because on-scene fire crews just weren't comfortable with, determining the cause, or there was other circumstances that they felt like they needed the investigation unit to come out. You had 4, 757 South Oliver, 2501 South Roosevelt, 2520 South Mosley, and most recently 3125 South Davidson. It's interesting because one of these, WPD was already kind of hitting on it a little bit with vacant structures. One of these that was investigated was a fire in the kitchen area of a vacant unsecured home. So, I agree with WPD. It is an issue on the south side. And, and I think everybody's really trying to put their heads together and figure out how we move forward with addressing some of this. So that was the stats. I'll entertain any questions anybody have.
No question.
No questions? All righty then. Like I said, where to reach us if you have any questions. Reach out to us and we'll try to get the answers for you.
Great. Thank you. We
Yep.
appreciate you.
Bet. Take care.
And now we'll move on with the Wichita Public Library update.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Jones. I'm the communications specialist for the Wichita Public Library, and I come bearing good news, I hope, for everyone tonight. We are reopening our library branches on Monday, March 8th for in-person services. So everyone in District 3 can finally come and see the new Walters Branch Library at 4195 East Harry Street. It's a beautiful facility. I've had the pleasure of going and taking some photos, and we just filmed our virtual tour today when we finally got all of our furniture in. So it's a lovely space, and I'm so excited for everyone to come and see the new library facility. So I kind of want to go over just real quick what our reopening plans look like. So we will be open for regular hours beginning Monday, March 8th. Customers are able to come in and browse the shelves. We will have public computers available, and we'll also have our print, copy, and fax services available at locations that offer those services, including the Walters branch. Customers with mobile devices can come in and use our free Wi-Fi service at library locations. We also are offering our self-check stations like we normally do. So if you want to have a no contact or a contactless experience at the library, we have the self-check stations that you can use. The Walters branch does have a brand new self-check station, just like the ones at the Advanced Learning Library. We are still going to offer our curbside and drive-up window services at all locations for people who may not want to come into the library at this time. We're still going to offer our virtual programs via Zoom, and as the spring and summer months roll along, we'll slowly add in-person programs. We're already planning for our summer reading program, and we plan to spend a lot of time outside. So we're looking forward to that. Our Book a Librarian Tech Help will be available by appointment only at the Advanced Learning Library. And we will also open our Research Pavilion at the Advanced Learning Library, and that will be by appointment only as well. So while we have all of these great services available again to the public, we also have a few things that we want people to keep in mind. We are not opening our collaboration rooms and our meeting rooms at this time. We're using those spaces for storage for furniture, and we're still quarantining returned materials to the library for 24 hours before we put them back in circulation. We are removing a lot of our lounging furniture at the library. We're wanting to sort of do a grab and go service right now to get people in, let people browse the shelves, get the materials they need. If they want to use public computers, more than welcome to, but we're trying to discourage having any sort of larger gathering happen at the library until we get COVID a little bit more under control and we're able to kind of maneuver that a little bit easier. Our Friends of the Library used bookstore at the Advanced Learning Library will remain closed, but we are working with them to reopen that space. They operate in such a tiny space, so we're going to have to be a little creative in how we reopen the used bookstore. And the Reverie Coffee Roasters at the Advanced Learning Library downtown will also remain closed. And just like most places, we're just asking customers who are able to wear their mask when they come into the library. Try to keep it over your nose and your mouth. We're also asking people to be mindful of the 6 feet social distancing rules. Use hand sanitizer. We'll have hand sanitizing stations all over the library branches for you to use. We'll also have some masks available at the front. If you forget a mask or leave it in your car so you don't have to go back, we'll give you a disposable mask to use. And then I also want to let everyone know that staff will be cleaning different high-touch surfaces throughout the day. So we're going to keep our libraries as clean as we possibly can as we reopen to the public. That's all I really have for you tonight. Other than that, we're looking forward to a great spring session. We have a ton of online programs available. You can check out the Evolve guide that will be available at libraries when we reopen. That's the joint guide with Library, Park and Recreation, and City Arts. There's a ton of stuff coming up this spring you don't want to miss. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
David, go ahead.
Mr. Jones, thank you very much for the presentation. I was just on the City of Wichita's website for the public library. Where would we find the link to your virtual tour?
It was filmed today, so give us a few days to edit it together, and then we'll put it on our YouTube page, and we'll also include it on the Walters location page. So I supervise our videographer, so I'm trying to think what his workload is right now. So I would say by early next week, we should have it done and put up on the website and on YouTube.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I got a
Make sure
question.
to share that in the newsletter too for people.
Yes,
Cool.
I'll make sure Maddie has the link.
Richard, I see your hand up, and then Michael after that.
Unmute,
You're-
Richard.
You're still muted, Richard.
Okay, sorry. Sean,
Yes.
March 8th. Is there going to be a grand opening?
Not at this, not yet. We are planning for something hopefully this summer. We want to make sure that we do the grand opening right. Since Dr. Walters still has family, his wife is, I believe she's in Maryland right now. We want to make sure that we extend an invite to family. We're also working with the Kansas African American Museum to bring some guest speakers who are involved with the Dockham Drugstore sit-in to be part of that celebration. We initially wanted to do something in February or March when we did open the branch, but because of how weird it is to navigate COVID, we just wanted to make sure that gathering limits would allow us to properly invite people into the branch at once so we can do the celebration the right way. So we're aiming for sometime this summer. Maddie actually serves on our planning committee for the grand opening. So we'll make sure that we keep her in the loop, but rest assured something is coming.
Okay, so and what time on the 8th are you actually opening the doors to the public?
Walters branch is going to be open from 1 to 8 on Monday, and then 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Tuesday through Friday.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, Sean, you mentioned in your presentation about being outdoors quite a bit. Are you trying or planning on utilizing Clapp Park once it gets established in some way?
You know, that is definitely not out of the question. Since it's right by the Walters Branch Library, we have a youth services librarian who services both the Alfred Branch and the Walters Branch. And I'll make sure to pass that information along. So once Clapp is,
up and running.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely use that. And I'm Troy
Well,
on the line. So
a suggestion. I was thinking what would be a remarkable thing for certain age children would be to have a naturalist or a tree, whatever they call a tree person, and a tour of all the different trees that are in Clap Park, just, and then read about it in books and stuff like that. Just throwing that idea out. Thank you.
Yeah.
Michael, that's a great idea. We'll collaborate. Sean, just let you know that the park is available right now. Even though there's a master plan, the park is open and available. So something we could collaborate. We'll talk.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a bandstand for my piece of that performance. So I'll have to wait.
So a nice sort of elements from NASCAR Park down at Clap Park. Yeah, that's one of the things we're really excited most about having the Walters branch in District 3 is the opportunity to collaborate not only with city departments, but other organizations that service the southeast portion of Wichita. Maddie's always giving me organizations and people I need to contact. So rest assured, I don't think there will be any problem programming our Walters branch once we're up to a normal capacity. And we're really excited about it.
So are we, actually.
Yeah.
Very much so. You have office space over there too, don't you?
There will be a collaboration or a meeting room, yes. And the meeting room is awesome because the way the building's designed, it's towards the back of the building. So it's actually accessible after hours. So we can actually close, like if the library portion's closed, we can close that off. Customers can still access the restrooms, but the meeting room can be reserved for outside of library operating hours.
Great. I'll mute myself again.
Any other questions for Sean? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, we can't wait to see the new library. So
thank you. Everyone have a great evening.
thank you. All right, now we'll move on to the public agenda. I believe George Theo Harris had asked to speak on the public agenda.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. This is George.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
Okay. Back when we did on the 9th, when we met with the 9 candidates, met with the 7 DAB members, I was 3 weeks out of knee replacement surgery and I was in extreme pain. I wasn't on a painkiller and I had to go last. So when I was there, I may have seemed nervous, but I was just in extreme pain. But anyhow, hello, Dab. Back several years ago, I kept asking James to pick me to be on DAB 3. At that time, I owned 4 houses in 4 different neighborhoods in District 3, Grandview Heights, Longview, Fairfax, and Meade. He didn't want me on his DAB board, so eventually I quit asking. I don't need to tell any of you what obligation you have to the citizens of District 3. A city councilor can't be fired by anyone. They can only be recalled or ousted if they are doing something terribly wrong. They can be voted out after their first term has been completed. You all had an opportunity to interview all 9 candidates, and some of your grading has the paper and media scratching their heads, as am I. Mr. Capon, I asked 8 days before February 9th for you to call and talk, as I did with Catherine Johnson, and she did call and talk, and then she graded me appropriately. Yet you didn't call me, and then graded me an F-, 5 on 11 of the 12 of my answers from you. You're the only person from the council or DAB that thought what James Clendenin did was like getting pulled over and fighting a moving violation. You should remove yourself before the next appointed person has to remove you. Some of you graded quite consistently and appropriately. The 9 candidates, thank you. How could a guy with 42 years in the district be graded equal or close to other candidates with less time? Mike Luke, 9 for me, and 9 for Joseph with 10 months, and 8 for Jared. Did you not understand the question or grading system? Richard Ruth gave me a 10, but a 9 for Joseph. Ron Tracy graded me a 5 and Jared a 9. Did I lose points for being in the district too long? Then the district attendance to DAB, neighborhood cleanups, breakfast, and tours. Mike Loop, a 7 for me, 8 for Joseph. I've done more cleanups than the years he has lived. Ron Tracy, 5 for me and 7 for Joseph. I'm not trying to pick on Joseph, but yet you graded Nick Blasey low for being in the district not long enough. Yet he has above the 1% priced house in District 3 and not going anywhere soon. In closing, Ron signed my petition, yet gave me a 60 or a D-. He signed he wanted to be vice chair. I believe his best chair would be the kitchen chair, living room chair, or dining room chair, as he complained one of the candidates would make for a long meeting. Resign and stay home, and they won't be long at all. I'm not a sore loser. I knew there wasn't a path for me because of the nonpartisan makeup of the council. Wink, wink. District 3 deserves the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, George, for sharing your opinion. I don't know if anyone feels like they want to respond, but I would like to move any sort of DAB conversation about the vacancy process and wait till the end of the meeting so that we can let our city staff go ahead and do their presentations. And then if we need to come back to those comments about the process, we can spend time on that after those other agenda items. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on with Troy Houtman and hear your presentation for us tonight.
Hello, Catherine. Thank you very much for the introduction. And before we jump into anything, I wanted to take this opportunity to give city staff a great shout out. The police and fire folks, they do a wonderful job for us. And as a city employee, I really appreciate the things they do. They already left. Sean and the library folks, they're hustling and dealing with a lot of changes and stuff. And I really admire the work that they do. I saved a couple here for the last. And Maddie, I really appreciate all the work that you do, hanging in there with all the adversity that you're dealing with, and you keep us all straight, and the work you do is fantastic. We have Scott Wadle here on the call, another fantastic city employee. These are all the great folks that make our city run well, and Scott's gonna have a great presentation for you guys in a little bit. So thanks for giving me this opportunity to shout out to all my fellow employees. All right, so I do have a presentation for you guys. It's a PowerPoint. I think Maddie is, or somebody's loading it up.
Okay, yeah. Do you want to share your screen, or do you want me to go ahead and share it through my screen?
You go ahead.
Okay, let me get it up.
So what I'm going to present today is an overview of what we do for planning and addressing our capital projects with athletic courts. A quick, as Maddie's putting that up, we roughly have about 225,000.
I'm sorry, are you guys able to see that?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, 1 second. Okay, do you see it?
Yep, now we can see.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so as I mentioned, we have about $225,000 a year to address our athletic courts throughout all of our parks. One of the things that we've been working on is really addressing the quality of life throughout Wichita, through our parks, making improvements to our parks, making our parks world-class, and really kind of doing some great things for programming, for pickleball, tennis courts, basketball courts, you name it. We have a lot of courts out there that are old, that were built in the 70s and 80s, and now we are slowly putting this program together to address replacement and modifications to these courts. So if you can go to the next slide. So we have an inventory that's pretty big. We have roughly about 140 parks throughout the whole system, but we have a total of 177 athletic courts, the whole system. The majority of them are tennis courts. We have these basketball courts and multi-use courts, sand volleyball courts, and most of them are at O.J. Watson. Currently, we have 19 pickleball courts, and the demand is for 200 pickleball courts right now. That's something that we're trying to address and work with on a whole different scale and a whole different program. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we have about $225,000 annually, and that gives us a total of $2.25 million over 10 years. It just kind of it's just a scratch on what we really need to get as far as funding. When we look at replacing courts, you'll see this in the next slide. It's far more than the $17,000 per court. So we are being very strategic on how we address the replacements of our courts. And we're also looking at reducing some of the courts, which might also help us with this long-term problem. Some ideas of reducing some of the courts is looking at demand and looking at locations. It's not necessarily that we want to take things away, but we're looking at ways of being more strategic and operating our resources to meet the demand for our capital needs. Next slide. So as I mentioned, here's some examples of what it costs to actually replace a court. And we use what's called post-tension, which is these cables running through the concrete, and it actually tightens up on either side, so it squeezes the concrete together. And this really kind of avoids the opportunity for cracks to happen. So as you can see, it gets kind of expensive for a futsal court, which is a fancy court for soccer on a fast pace, which is concrete. Tennis courts, it's about $75,000. For a basketball court, it's about $70,000. However, it's worth the investment, and this is why we have these standards, and we used these post-tensions, because these will last 40, 50, even 60 years. We've taken over some homeowners association parks where they actually use asphalt, and that asphalt will only last 5 to 7 years, and then they start to crack and become really, really dangerous. Next slide, Maddie. One of the things that we always get asked, and we only do this on a special situation, is put lighting into the courts. Lighting is very, very expensive, and there's a lot of maintenance in regards to it. We've done it on a few occasions where we know that there's going to be a lot of usage. We are right now working on a system over at Edgemoor for the pickleball folks. It's called Light Up Edgemoor, and we know that there's going to be a lot of usage at those pickleball courts, and we're going to expand it from 6 pickleball courts to 12. But we avoid putting and adding lighting at any of our courts if we can all help it, because it's very expensive and a lot of maintenance is involved with it. One of the bigger projects is Stryker. It was a $1.5 million to light up all the soccer fields there. And if you ever drive by there at night, it's just a sight to see with all the lights, but it's being used. That's the big difference, is that we know that there's programming going on, and they actually use those lights until 1 o'clock in the morning. All right, next slide. So some recent projects that we worked on was over at Harrison. We did a futsal court there. Harrison, we added a brand new post-tension basketball court. Sherwood Glen, we added a half-court basketball there, and the other half of it is with pickleball. We did over at West Meadows Park some asphalt crack repairs. That was by the direction of that neighborhood there. What scares me about this is that this asphalt repair is probably only going to last about 3 or 4 years, and we spent about $15,000 on it. This would have been in one of the situations where we wanted to remove an asset for something that's a little bit better, but because the community asked for it, and this is part of why we're here today, is to get some feedback from you guys. But it was such an important thing for them that we went ahead and made those repairs, knowing that it's only going to last for about 4 or 5 years. All right, next slide. So outside of our $225,000 capital improvement projects that we have on a regular basis, we have had a couple really big projects come on board, and with some donations over at the Riverside Tennis Center, it's $1.4 million, $1.5 million CIP project, and we got $400,000 from a grant. So we are resurfacing all of the tennis courts there, and we're actually adding 3 tennis courts and 6 pickleball courts. So we are really excited about this because it's going to expand the playability of this site, and we know we're going to bring in more tournaments from out of town. So it's going to be a huge asset for the downtown area. And then we have some other ones that are under design, and then like I mentioned down in the bottom, there's an inventory adjustment. So at Southview Park, there's a double tennis court that's in really, really poor condition. It's going to be removed, and we're going to restore it back to green space. And we did this based on some public survey results and looking at the usage of the park. So this is an opportunity where we didn't have to put money into it. We could put this money into other assets. All right, next slide. So we do a court condition survey or inventory on all of these, and we rate these, how good they are or how bad they are. Unfortunately, we probably have more that are in poor condition than we do have them in good condition. Some of the items that we look at is the number of cracks, the size of the cracks, the material that's used, the amount of complaints that we get, the condition of the striping. And this all gives us an opportunity to develop a scale on all the different courts that we have. And like I mentioned, I think we have more courts that are in the poor condition than in the good condition, which means that we have a lot of work to do. Next slide. So some other things that we also look at in prioritizing which courts are going to be worked on each year is community engagement, getting information from the DABs and from City Council. You know, we think we have a pretty good idea of which parks are being used, where the play is being used, but we're not there 24/7, and those folks in those communities can give us a better indication. And so that's why we're making these presentations, and we're going to ask for some feedback, and you guys can do that not necessarily today, but you could always email Maddie, or you could email the Parks Department, and with any kind of suggestions that you might have in regards to this particular program. And then also in general, anything else you guys have in mind, we're always looking for new ideas. All right, next slide. So here's the top 10 worst courts. And for basketball, there's a list of those folks and of those sites. And then for tennis, there's a list of those sites as well. Obviously, we want to make sure that our playing surfaces are safe. And so that's why these become one of our highest priorities as we start looking at how do we spend that $225,000 every year. Slide 11, if you don't mind. So to get to the point of where we're at for the proposal of 2021, we're going to be taking this proposal to council, and the 3 sites that we want to address are the 3 basketball courts is Boston, Harvest, and Plainview. And so we want to make sure that these courts are addressed this year. That's what's slated this year. And then if you guys ever want to find out what the list of priorities are for the next 8 to 10 years, we can always provide that as well. But this is what we're moving forward with for this year, how we're going to spend the $225,000. And I just wanted to take you guys through the steps that we don't just pick these out of a hat. We're very, very strategic. There's a very important process that we go through in regards to evaluating the courts, the court conditions, the safety conditions, as well as the usability of these courts. And this is how we create the priority. So I got to think the next slide. So we're always looking for additional funding, and we're always asking for more funding to address not just the courts, but some of the other assets and amenities in our parks. But we always are working to make that happen. And this is why we were successful, because this came through a separate CIP program to address the Riverside Tennis Center. Like I mentioned, we're going to be pretty excited because this is going to be a dynamic change in operations and playability for Riverside tennis courts. And we know that's going to have an impact, an economic impact, as well as a quality of life impact for Wichita. So I think the last slide is up for questions, but there's a really cool picture there. Some of our favorite mascots playing some futsal. So I think if there's any questions, I'm here to answer those.
Got a question.
Yep.
Yeah, when I understand the lighting for athletic events, tennis has to be pretty bright if they're going to play in the evening. But when you're talking about CLAP and you're talking about streets and sidewalks, are solar going to be considered where the whole package would be on the top of the lamp and it shuts off after so many hours or whatever?
Sustainability is a huge topic that we're trying to infuse and implement in our plans. So I think as we're looking at bringing on new parks or bringing on new projects, we're definitely going to be looking for those opportunities. And I think now we're seeing a situation where the cost of implementing those will save us some money in the long run. It wasn't necessarily that situation, especially for solar, but we definitely want to try to address those situations. And I think one of the areas that I've seen some really cool examples is in the shelters, where they can actually have some solar panels on the shelters, building in on the batteries, that they can actually power lighting in the shelters through the evening. So that's something that we're going to be looking at. Eventually, when we get through the master plan for CLAP, I think those are some of the items that we want to address. The street lighting or sidewalk lighting that goes through distance through the parks, that's going to be a little bit more expensive, because then you're looking at an individual solar panel and an individual battery for each one of those. But every year it keeps getting less and less expensive. They become more and more efficient. It's definitely something we want to address.
Okay, one last question. Are you allowed to consider wind turbines? I mean, because you got enough space that you can make sure if it falls over, it doesn't hit people. But is that, I know they're not cheap, but once they get up and operational, they usually provide a good source.
So I think that's a zoning question that I need to address, and I don't think we have that opportunity yet. Particularly if we're going to be doing something in the parks, we're probably talking about a really big wind turbine, and I don't see that happening. But I can't give you a definite answer. But you know what? You gave me an idea, so I'm going to do some research.
Thank you.
Richard, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Let me lower my hand. Okay. First of all, I want to say that Community Gardens has an enormous amount of support in Wichita. As I engage with different groups, man, it comes up all the time. Most recently, USD 259 administrator in a Zoom with Kansas Appleseed was talking about his idea for a community garden at a school that was really impressive. So it's exciting to hear so many people talk about that, and hopefully more people will get behind that and support that. Oh, you had talked about the court conditions, and you know, the nice thing about these basketball courts is you have residents of all different ages, right? Young kids, just all kids. And so I'd like to plant a seed that when, you know, you're going to do like painting of a backstop or a backboard, anything in those parks, that we might try to engage residents of that neighborhood and who use that park to do that work, to come together, maybe an adult men's basketball team could organize the effort. Some people from school could bring kids and have a positive interaction with neighbors around supporting that park and getting that cleaned up. And so keep that in mind. I guess you said there was going to be I could email you for future assessments of courts, and maybe we could work towards something.
Richard,
yeah.
One of the things that is one of my favorite projects was over at McAdams. We have 4 basketball courts over there, and we had an artist come in and they did 4 courts worth of paint, and they also painted all the backboards as well. So there's a drone picture that shows, and it's spelled out McAdams. It's just a beautiful looking court and adds a lot of pride in the backboards as well. So I totally support that. I think that just adds a lot of pride to the park and to the community. And then in regards to community gardens, I'm ready. Whenever we find somebody who's ready to make that commitment, we'll find some property and we'll support community gardens in any parkland.
Great. Jared, go ahead.
Thank you. Let me lower my hand also. The only question I had is, and I did have to step away from a little bit, but what do you mean by programmable court? When you say a pickleball court is programmable, what does that mean?
That means we can host a tournament. We could do lessons there. We can add other kind of programs. Maybe it's used for fitness instead of, maybe there's an hour that we do a fitness class there instead of pickleball. So we want to maximize the use of all these courts as much as we possibly can.
Okay.
Did that answer your question, Jared?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I do really appreciate all of the like high quality free outdoor pickleball courts. Like those are great. And then sometimes there aren't enough courts and I have to go to Riverside, but at least it's affordable there. So that doesn't break the bank if there's 4 of us playing. So, I mean, I've had family come and visit and they were so surprised that those were just public courts. And so I really appreciate those.
Well, we're trying to meet that demand. We know pickleball is the next big sport. And like I mentioned, that we could probably put 200 courts and they'd all be filled up. In closing, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity and to spend some time with you guys and share stuff from Parks and Recreation. And you guys have all been great supporters of our department and all the quality of life things that we're doing. So thank you and keep up the good work. And if you ever have any questions, email, call, give us smoke signals, whatever it is that you want to do to get a hold of us.
Great. Thank you, Troy. We appreciate you.
Take care, guys. Good night.
Next, we'll move on to our Places for People presentation.
Hello, I'm Scott Wadle from the Planning Department. I'm very excited to be here to present the Places for People implementation. So let's see if I can figure out how to share my desktop here. There we go. Can everybody see that slide with the river and the boat in the middle? All right, perfect. Well, once again, thanks so much for the opportunity. This is talking about it at a rather high level, but it's still quite a bit of detail. So as we go through it, please stop me, ask questions as you have them. If it's a question, it's going to take a little bit longer, or if it's quite a dialogue, we might want to save it to the end just to make sure that we get through all the material. But again, this is for your benefit, and we're looking for input and feedback on it. So any thoughts you've got would be great. And so with that, I'll go ahead and get started. I can get the keys. Let's see if we can do this. Okay. So in terms of public engagement, I know it says zoning, but this is both for the zoning and the land bank. We've had 2 social media town halls. We've gone to a number of different district advisory boards. We're going to the Planning Commission, ultimately to the City Council. For the zoning piece, we'll go to the Planning Commission because our zoning code is a joint city and county zoning code. And all throughout the process, we're collecting public comments. Public comments are especially useful right now because we'll be collecting them from the district advisory boards before we go back and report on progress to the City Council. In terms of comments and questions, how you can submit those, You can do it through social media. You can email us. You can visit the website. We've got some forms up there where you can provide comments to the website. You can call us. You can mail them. So a whole variety of different ways. So tonight, again, really looking to get input. Want to answer your questions. I want to share information about the proposal, what's being proposed, and also the process. And in order to accomplish that, the agenda for tonight is to look at the background. So where are these proposals coming from? Why are they being recommended? What the zoning one consists of, what the land bank proposal consists of, and then the next steps. So background, hopefully this cover looks familiar to some of you. That's from the comprehensive plan, the joint city and county comprehensive plan. We'll talk more about it in depth, but the basic is that out of that comp plan, there came a recommendation for an urban infill strategy about how could we promote reinvestment in existing neighborhoods. And out of that document, then that developed the Places for People plan, which had 3 recommendations, or there were many recommendations, but 3 that we're looking at and working on right now, which is zoning updates, creation of a land bank, and then also looking at incentives. And we'll talk more about those. So the community investment plan, this was back in 2016, that it was endorsed by both the city and the county. It really had an infrastructure focus in terms of where we invest in infrastructure, how we make those prioritization decisions. And that's been reflected in the CIPs for both local governments. It also, again, included a recommendation for an urban infill strategy. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And it identified an area as the established central area. And I've got a map for you in just a few. In terms of the process for how this was developed, it was a 4-year process. It was led by a citizen steering committee, which I believe we've got a member here joining with us. It had a survey of over 4,000 people responded to it, and more than 50 different meetings and events. There were a number of different trends that were identified in this plan, and which helped form some of the recommendations. So first, that this would be an era of fiscal constraint, right? There wouldn't be any dramatic changes in terms of revenue, and so expenses would have to be observed and monitored, and smart decisions made about how to use the resources that we have. That household sizes would trend to get smaller, and also that they would get more diverse, and that the population overall would grow older. And again, these are things that you've probably seen in other reports and studies that have come out both nationwide and locally. In addition, the plan calls out that there's a trend of a preference for more transportation options. We've certainly seen that from the young professionals of Wichita and other studies that have been done, as well as increased international and national competition for talent, right? So keeping and retaining talent and the challenges and the competition that's going on with that. So again, one of the big recommendations out of the comprehensive plan was the development of an urban infill strategy. And this was identified in order to help reverse patterns of decline and abandonment in some areas, to help reduce growth pressures on rural areas surrounding our communities, to provide for efficient use of land by using existing infrastructure and resources that are already in place, right? We've got existing roads, we have existing police service, we have existing fire service, et cetera. And then also to improve the quality of life in the areas, I would say in all areas, but especially those experiencing abandonment and decline. So here is the boundary of the established central area. And this becomes important because this is where the recommendations that we're talking about tonight are going to be focused. So you can see it extends from Ridge Road on the west, Rock Road on the east, 29th Street on the north, and 31st Street on the south. So there's a significant chunk of District 3 that's in there. So the urban infill strategy later became known. It was developed, when it was developed, it got the name to it, which was Places for People. And it includes a vision for the future of strong neighborhoods, vibrant centers, and a strong economy. And that would be accomplished, again, through an infill reinvestment strategy, through walkable design, multimodal transportation, and through a variety of different housing options. And so those, again, are picking up on those trends that were identified in the comprehensive plan and also reported in other studies and whatnot. So in the places for people plan, it took the ECA and it did some really in-depth looking at it. We're not going to talk so much about all of these, but in the document, you can see the areas of stabilities, areas of opportunities, different hubs that are located there. Again, I'm not going to speak too much about them, but I do want to highlight that they're there and that there was an in-depth look at it. In terms of the development, there was an advisory committee made up of various groups, including neighborhood associations, city council appointees, and different stakeholders. Again, more than 55 public meetings and events on this, and visual preference survey with more than 300 responses. And that's important because the results of that survey help shape the recommendations for the zoning update that we'll talk about. So again, 3 things coming out of it: zoning updates, land bank recommendation, and strategic investment strategy. Tonight, we're talking about zoning and land bank, but know that the strategic investment strategy, we're in the beginning stages of looking at that. We're working with a firm to help us, and they're looking at what is the cost to build homes or development in a given area, and then what can you sell it for, what can you expect to get for it in terms of a return, what is the gap, and then what are options, what are best practices that other communities have used to do that. And so very interested to see what the results are. Hopefully we'll have some draft information towards the end of this month. But tonight we're here to talk about zoning and land bank, and the first one is zoning. So I'm sure you're all familiar with zoning, especially from your service on the DAB. And thank you so much for considering all of those agenda items that come to you, because each one is important and it takes a lot of deliberation to figure out what's the best way to move forward with it. But again, zoning regulates essentially what the property can be used for. It can also regulate design as well. And it's of course administered by a local government. So why would changes be recommended to zoning, especially to encourage revitalization of neighborhoods? Well, first, because zoning governs land use and design, it really has a dramatic impact on transportation and especially walkability. And it has it gradually over a period of time, especially when we're talking about infill and redevelopment, because it's incrementally done, because it's not large sites or properties that are available. It's a vacant lot here and there. It allows us to increase housing choices and opportunities, again, gradually. And we'll talk a little bit more about those, but you know, the way that the trends are pointing in terms of diversity and in terms of households, ages, et cetera, it really is leading to a demand in different types of housing stock. Physical differences pre and post. So our current zoning code is very well written for more suburban style development. And it's done well with our existing older neighborhoods, but there are opportunities to make adjustments and improvements. We'll talk about those. And again, reemphasizing that zoning helps us to encourage infill and redevelopment, which utilizes existing infrastructure and existing resources that are already in place. So it just provides that much more of a benefit to the community, as well as the social and other attributes. So the zoning change, we've talked about it just in general, but specifically there are 4 land uses that, and all of them are residential. So we're not talking industrial or commercial, we're talking strictly residential. There are 4 land uses that we're looking at. One is accessory apartments, one is duplex developments, one is single family dwellings on smaller than what's currently allowed lots. The other one is townhomes and multi-unit apartments. And I've got illustrations to show you what we're talking about. The first thing to know also is that it's focused on the ECA. So these are options that will be that are being proposed for the ECA, not requirements for someone to do this. They could still go through the existing zoning process, which you see, which is, you know, right now, if someone wants to put a duplex in SF5, they need to request for a zoning change that comes before you. But this is an option that would help streamline that. But there in return, there are design standards to help ensure that the development is respectful of the surrounding area. And again, this is based on the visual preference survey that's conducted as part of Places for People. And then again, it reduces the approval process from approximately 75 days, which is what it takes to get a full zoning change, to about 21 days, possibly less, and we'll talk a little bit about that nuance. So zoning an accessory apartment, you may be familiar with these as accessory dwelling units, maybe granny flats, or a carriage house. I've sometimes heard them referred to as. So in this case, you can see on the illustration that there's the standalone one, which is in the rear of the primary structure, the home. Likewise, the lower one, there is an accessory apartment above a garage. And so these are dwelling units. So they've got the kitchen, they've got the bathroom, they've got the bedroom. They're separate from the main home, and yet they share utilities. So they don't have separate utilities. So the meters are all the same. So what are the benefits of allowing or providing less constraints on accessory apartments? Well, it responds to interest in additional housing options. It provides just one more housing option. We can make it so that it's enhanced in terms of being compatible designs. We'll talk about what some of those constraints could be. We can reduce the regulatory hurdles and encourage these in order to encourage revitalization in existing neighborhoods. It increases the supply of walkable housing because for the most part, these neighborhoods have great bones. They've got good street grids, good networks, they've got sidewalks, they've got land uses, shops that are nearby that within walking distance, they've got schools within walking distance. It provides for an efficient use of land because we're using land that's already in use, it's already got services and infrastructure. So here's some examples. So the lower one in blue, you can see is a standalone unit. The two on the right are units that are above garages. So they don't have to look dramatically different than what the neighborhood looks. In terms of what's being proposed, these would be allowed in return. If someone wanted to do this, and there are two options, we'll talk about those, but if someone wanted to use this optional process to get permission to do an accessory apartment, they would have to have the designs submitted and reviewed. And the designs would have to show, they'd have to meet that the architectural style materials are similar to the main building. So it can't be completely different. It's got to be compatible with the neighborhood. Now, compatible with the neighborhood can mean a lot of different things, but in general, we're looking for a similar form that's representative of the area. That the maximum square footage is up to 75% of the main home. So it can't dwarf the existing house that's already there, right? The main structure. Likewise, we don't want these to be looming over the neighbors. So the maximum height would be 60% of what's allowed in that zoning district. So in this case, SF5 generally has, it's got a max height of 35 feet. So these would be limited to about 20 feet, so about 2 stories. And then there are other design requirements such as roofing, siding materials, those kind of things. There are other communities that are looking at this all across the country. This is just a small sample of ones that are kind of near us and one from Washington. So that's what's being proposed with accessory apartments. We'll talk a little bit more about the mechanics actually after we get done talking about the designs of these things. The second one is duplexes. Duplex, there are 2 units that are connected. They're on separate utilities. They can be designed so that they're sitting side by side. They can also be one above the other. As you can see in some of these illustrations, we'll see some more photos in just a bit. Again, many of the same benefits that we saw for the accessory apartments. I'm not going to talk too much about that. I do want to look at the designs though. So here's one upper right-hand corner. It's got 2 streets. It has doors facing each of the streets. That would be a design requirement if someone wanted to use this faster process for approvals. You can see the one on the lower left, the red building. It's got a unit below the main structure. You can see the one in the middle. It's a little bit more of a modern look, but you'll notice that on all of these, the garages don't make up more than 50% of the facade, which we'll talk about. The garages also do not come out closer to the street than the main front wall of the structure, which is something that we're looking for. Because again, we want to make sure that it's respectful of the existing area. In terms of the lot sizes, the minimum would be 2,500 square feet per unit, so 5,000 square feet total. which is what currently SF5 limits for single, smallest lot for an SF5 single family house. And again, the design standards would apply for this. They're very similar in terms of garages extending no more than front wall line, so you wouldn't have a garage out in front. In fact, this white one in the middle, probably, I don't know that that would actually comply with that, even though it doesn't look like the garage is that far out. The corner lots would have entrances on opposite sides of the streets. Oh, I skipped an important one. Garage doors would constitute no more than 50% of the ground level, and that would be measured using only the first floor. We would not use the second floor in that calculation. That the front doors are prominent in that developments with several units would have require different design variety for the facades. So they could not, you could not have just one pattern repeating the entire time. And again, there are constraints on the roof, how it looks, what the shape of it is, the siding, etc. There are a number of different communities, again, all across the country looking at this. Here are some examples in terms of zoning and how duplexes fit into that. The third land use is compact lots, single family homes on compact lots. So currently in our zoning code, the smallest lot that you can build a single family home on without some variance or something specific would be 5,000 square feet. What this would do is this would allow you to construct them on as small as 3,000 square feet. So we would get properties that maybe historically could have been developed, we'll get them back into productive use. The benefits of allowing this is, again, very similar to some of the ones that you've already seen. It gets regulation out of the way. It helps with housing diversity and options in existing areas. It encourages investment and redevelopment. It's also an efficient use of land using existing services. So again, this is limited just to single family dwelling units. Minimum size of the lots, 3,000 square feet. In terms of parking, off-street parking space would only be required if adjacent on-street parking was not available, and that design standards would apply. And those specifically are that garages, again, extend this time no more than 5 feet from the front wall. The garage doors no more than 50% of the ground floor level. That the front doors are prominent on the front of it, and the developments have different facades if they've got multiple units next to each other. And again, we've got things about the roof, the pitch of it, the siding material, etc. Again, working to ensure that it's respectful and complementary of the area and neighborhood around it. A number of different communities are looking at this. And in fact, there's a development down in Texas where this photo with the picket fence is from. There's a community in our metro region that is actually, I believe, got a development similar to this, using similar designs going in. So it'll be really exciting to see how that works out for them. So the fourth one then is townhomes and multi-units. So these are units, residential units that share a wall. You can see an example here from Wichita. There are others, some other photos. Again, very, very similar benefits. It adds to the diversity of housing options in the ECA. It decreases, this option would decrease regulatory hurdles, more walkable, efficient use of land, efficient use of services. In this case, what's proposed is that these would be limited to a maximum of 4 units on a standard parcel. We do that by a certain amount of square footage that's required for each unit. And that the maximum height would be 35 feet. So these would not be towering over adjacent properties, that they would be of a compatible scale with the neighborhood. That again, design requirements would apply if you wanted this faster process. And those being that, again, garages no more than 50%, because we want to make sure that this reflects the character of the older neighborhoods. That the garage doors are equal or recessed with the front doors. We don't want those sticking out in front of the structure. Front doors prominent on the front, and that, again, there's variety if these units are going to be next to each other. Again, other communities, Wichita's not alone, other communities looking at these all across the country. Again, these are just examples of some photos there. So we've discussed the background. We've talked a little bit about the 4 different land uses. Now we're going to talk about their different alternatives for how to accomplish this in the zoning code. Our current process, which I'm sure you're familiar with, has the application. So an application is received by the planning department. The public notices are done, and that's done in the way of a letter. Letters are sent out to properties within 200 feet. A sign is posted on the yard for each street that abuts it. Also, there's a public notice that's published in the newspaper. After that, it goes to the planning commission, and either sometime around then, before or after, it'll go to you all, the district advisory board. Then after that, it will go to the city council. City council can decide to send it back, or they can decide to approve it or not to approve it. This process takes about 75 days on average. So alternatives, the options that we're proposing, that's proposed as part of this, and there are different alternatives for it. One would be by right, and the second one would be administrative approval. And I'll go through what the differences are. So by right, you effectively would not have anything zoning related really to deal with, as long as your design meets the requirements. If you walk in, you've got a house, you want to do an accessory apartment in the backyard on your garage. If you've got plans, you go down to get your construction permit. There would be a process to review your designs, make sure that they're compatible, that they comply with the design requirements about materials, roof, number of windows, that kind of stuff, height, etc. And if they are compatible with that, then you would be allowed to proceed with construction. It'd be a very fast process. If you don't comply with that, your designs don't, you would have an opportunity to update them. Or if you said, no, I don't want to update them, then you would have the option, you would essentially have to apply for a conditional use or a zoning change, the existing process. Now, let's say you wanted to do an accessory apartment. You knew right off the bat there's no way you were going to comply with it. You didn't want to comply with the design guidelines. You would still have the option right off the get-go of submitting for a zoning change right off the bat. You wouldn't even have to mess with this. But again, that would take you about 75 days. If I had to boil this down to 3 steps, the first step would be submit the construction permit application. 2, your application, your permit gets reviewed to make sure that your designs meet the standards. Number 3, you get approved, or you've got to do something else. So again, this streamlines the process quite a bit. It helps to encourage investment because people who are proposing these projects are going to know a little, they're going to have a better handle on timing, about what all is involved in terms of getting approvals. It's going to increase housing options in neighborhoods. So it can accommodate, in these cases, well, just a whole lot of other housing options. We can talk a little bit more about why those are a good thing. And it will require context-sensitive design. So in exchange for the option of getting approvals faster, you're going to have to use a design that is sensitive to the context in which it is going in.
Hey, Scott, I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
This is Jared. Since we're on kind of on this topic right now, you mentioned earlier in the presentation that streamlining the rezoning request process into as quick as 21 days.
That's correct.
So how do we make sure that all of these rezoning requests go in front of MAPC and the DAB?
Well, in this case, it actually would not. Not unless you had designs that didn't comply with it. And I'll go back to this flow diagram. So if, and again, this is not a change of the base zoning, so it would still remain what it is, but what you would be getting approval for is for this specific project, whether it's a duplex, an accessory apartment, whether it's the compact lots on a smaller lot, or if it's a small apartment building on a lot. And that's the change, is that this would streamline the process. So in this case, you wouldn't go before MAPC if it was by right, as long as your designs comply with those design standards.
Okay, so these
The
aren't
other
major rezoning request. We're not talking going from agricultural to limited commercial then.
Exactly, you're right. Yep. It's only for these 4 residential uses. So, and
Okay.
it's not to do with commercial, it's not to do with industrial. Those still require a traditional zone change. But under these proposals, these would be options, an option that a property owner could use if they knew they just wanted to do one of these 4 things.
Thank you.
No, you bet. Great question. Now, the second process, though, the second alternative that we could use would be for an administrative permit. And what that would do, that process would look like is someone would come up to the planning department, they wanted to do an accessory apartment or a duplex or something. They would come up to the planning department, they would submit their application. There would be a public notice, and it'd be different than what we traditionally use, and I'll show you that. There'd be a review of the designs to determine whether or not it meets the requirements. There would be a protest period, which people would be able to submit protests. And if there were no substantial protests, meaning it doesn't go above a certain threshold, they could proceed with construction. And if their designs didn't meet the standards, they'd have to go back or go through another process. Or if there were substantial protests, they would have to go essentially through a conditional use or traditional zone change. But how that would look like is essentially, if I boiled it down, step 1, you submit a planning application. Step 2, you do a public notice. Number 3, the application gets reviewed, so the designs get looked at, see if they comply with the standards. And step 4 would be an opportunity for protest. And if the protest is more than 75% of the abutting property owners, then it would have to go to the planning commission. And this is what the public notice proposal looks like. So the property owner would have to put a sign on their property indicating that they're requesting a development application. We're not quite sure exactly what the sign would look like, but at a baseline, base minimum, this is what we currently use, maybe something different. But that they would notify all of the abutting properties. In this case, for this property, these with stars are the abutting properties because we don't count the street. As if the street wasn't even there, we count the properties across the street. There would be a 10-day public notice period where the sign would be up. And again, the threshold would be that 75%, so there's 8 owners, so you'd have to get whatever 75% of 8 is, you'd have to get protests from owners signing the protest to cause this application to go to the planning commission. So some considerations with this alternative is it's faster than the current process, but slower than by right. That the public notice and the protest options available with this, that there's more potential for process variability than the by right option. And it, again, similar to the other one, it requires context sensitive designs that encourage walkability. So that is a ton of information, and I still have one more thing to go through, which is land bank. But I want to pause and see if there's any questions on zoning. I know you deal with a lot of zoning questions. So anything you got, or any comments or thoughts that you've got, I'd love to get them. Or also, if you want to spend some time and think about it, we can always come back next month. Or there's the variety, or use any of the other variety of ways to get in touch with us too.
Scott?
Yeah.
Can you check your microphone connection? Because every time you speak, there's a lot of like fuzzy type feedback.
Oh no, that's
okay. Okay, I'm slowly losing my mind, but that's okay.
Oh my, well, I'm so sorry. Oh, I think it's part of my camera. So unfortunately, I don't know that there's a whole lot that I can do about it. But...
Okay, all right, well, we'll muscle through.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I have to say that when you were talking about substantial protest, I was thinking about the George Carlin routine where he talks about, jumbo shrimp, military intelligence, right? There's not going to be substantial protest if you shrink the protest area down to a yard. and then go. I mean, people are not going to see that, and hopefully that's not even the official sign. It could be a flyer that's fallen out of one of those circulars that get dumped in our yards that I never read. So I think substantial protest is something that is going to be very, very rare. I like the idea that, you know, the people who are most targeted by that or impacted by that development have that opportunity. I think it's unrealistic to say that this is going to be dependent upon 75% of those people, because I don't think you're going to, I think that's going to be a very difficult number to get, especially with the number of remote landlords that are in Wichita in some of these densification areas. So that's a big concern to me. I'm not sure why the city is wanting to move away from single family housing. I can see, you know, there's an attraction to densification having a more lively or tighter packed people in a city. It slows down some of the development, maybe allows for some wilderness to persist for a while, and maybe until the shorelines flood and people start rushing in to fill these mother-in-law suites. But I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of emphasis on multi-unit dwellings, and let's not kid ourselves. These are expensive structures to build. So we're talking about, if they are to be rented out, they would go for significantly more than what rentals are going for now. A duplex of the kind that you're showing there, you're talking about at least $500,000, right? So I think that gentrification is baked into this plan, especially if you're going to streamline the process to build those kinds of structures and make people who depart from that go through the longer process, the process that we have today. And I can see that there will be people wanting to, you know, just coming at us for those people who can't afford those designs that you're showing. But that's a lot of sizzle, you know, to sell the steak, right? But in reality, I don't see that providing any guarantee of a look and feel or integrity within the architectural designs of a community. You might get one or two of those, maybe, but it seems like it's just an opportunity for people who are very, very motivated to put that kind of money into a building to then turn around and say, okay, I'm going to rent this out to you for $400, $700, you know, $800 a month. No.
And I do have some considerations there's some things to think about for you. But Cindy, I don't know, I saw you raising your hand. I didn't know.
Well, there was just a couple of things that I wanted to say. One is, you know, when we developed the 20-year plan for the city and county, I'm not sure if I can remember the correct number, but I think it's like 53% of households, I believe in the next 15 years will be single person households across the city. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a change in some of these things that are being built. But I also share some of your concern, Rich, and I've expressed this. Scott's probably tired of hearing me say it, but I expressed it to other people as well. You know, we have 41% rental rate in our district. 41% of households are rentals. And what we want to be careful about in our district is that we're not going into an area that there's a lot of homeowners in the area and adding to those rental properties that are in the area, or changing the neighborhoods. Because part of what I hear sometimes at the MAPC is you've got a bunch of single person households that you've got homeowners, and suddenly somebody wants to put duplexes in there that are likely going to be rented, and it just changes the structure of the neighborhood. So I continue to express those concerns, but I think it's interesting that as we look towards having a majority of single person households, I think we'll see changes in what's being built.
And a couple other things to think about too for you all as you consider this is that in Wichita, we've just recently processed applications for, I don't know, well over 100 properties, I think, to be rezoned from single family to allow for accessory apartments out on the fringe. These are new developments.
91.
In fact, the developer has decided that in order to meet market demand, this is what he needs to do. And he said that this is being prompted, he's expressed it mostly because of the COVID, but I think that there are some underlying things that are also happening as far as demographics. But he talked about, people wanting to move, their mother into it, or having a place, an office, remote office where they could use, or kids at home doing school. So at the same time as we're talking about this proposal for the ECA, the Established Central Area, it's also occurring out on the fringe of the city as well. In terms of gentrification, I think that's an excellent point, and I think that that's a great question about will this increase gentrification, and that there's concerns. And gentrification is essentially where a rise in property values forces out longtime residents because either their property taxes or things just get more expensive. And in this case, what we're talking about is reinvestment in infill. And so I think you're exactly right, Richard, about the conversation about the cost of doing the construction. I think A, is going to be a limiting factor. And number two, I think just the availability of the land will also be a limiting factor in terms of how many sites are there for this to happen. So I think we're really talking about something that's more incremental, that one household decides that they want to do an accessory apartment, or that there's an open lot in an area and a development comes in there. So the hope is that by reinvestment, services will get better, and it'll be an incremental approach that will not have, the wholesale clearance and redevelopment of an area that would lead to, substantial increases in property values or taxes over a short amount of time.
Well, I think gentrification is an ugly byproduct of cities that do not engage neighbors and people living in the neighborhood in a very serious, deliberate, intentional, enthusiastic way, such as in supporting neighborhood plans. Start these things early on, these development projects early on with people that live there who have a vested interest in how the neighborhood develops. Work with them to ensure you don't need an outside architectural historian coming in or fancy contractors coming in from out of state to tell us, oh, here's what we're going to do. Bing, bang, boom. Here's a couple options for you. There are people in our neighborhoods that care deeply about what is one of the last pieces of value that some of us have, the equity in our homes, especially older people who've managed to stay in their homes and not been, forced out of them. So, or had to go because of, just all kinds of expenses.
And I think that's an excellent point too, is that we have a lot of people who would like to age in place, right? They don't want to get displaced from the neighborhood for a variety of different reasons. And in some cases, one of those reasons could be the inability to keep up or maintain a single family house. So if we've got that variety of housing options, it could provide, a way for them to downsize perhaps in the neighborhood, the same neighborhood where they go to church and they've got neighbors and friends. So
Right.
hopefully the diversity of housing, instead of just having single family homes, but rather maybe it's a single family home with an accessory apartment that you could, that where someone could stay, or maybe it's a duplex or something where people help maintain the place, can help people at varying lifestyle, stages in their lives, right? Whether it's someone who just comes out of college and is looking for an affordable place, whether it's a family, that wants to live in a single family house, or whether it's a grandparent or someone who's downsized, right? And empty nesters, and they want to have a smaller place so they don't have to do as much maintenance on.
I think part of the transparency that people are seeking is not so much an after the fact historical reaccount of what took place. We want to know early on in the process. We want to be engaged in the process here, not engaged by reading a legal notice earlier than that. Now, not everybody does. Not all neighborhoods want to do that. But it's an opportunity to strengthen neighborhoods and to build rapport between neighbors when neighbors are engaged in these kinds of things. So I hope that that's not missed out, and that there is room for that. I don't know that that's realistic, but
well, I think actually I think there's opportunities even outside of this process. And I think that what you've talked about with the neighborhood planning is especially important, because through neighborhood planning, we get guides for how land use should be done in an area. And that informs the recommendations that come from staff and the things that the DABs and the Planning Commission consider. And also, neighborhood plans are also an opportunity to look at design guidelines if that's something that the neighborhood wants to look into in terms of what the future development looks like.
So one of the things that we need to be mindful of is that we do have a population that is aging in place. People have said in some neighborhoods that they feel stuck doing life in that neighborhood because they can't sell their home and have anything left over to go start anywhere else. There's a lot of people like that in Wichita. And as Places for People is streamlining this process of redevelopment. MABCD is creating a streamlined process for getting houses into the demolition stage faster. Jim Howell is working on a law at the state level to try to give eminent domain rights to the state so that they can take houses in the county that are run down and problematic, houses that possibly belong to an elderly person who's not able to take care of their home and who has never been approached by a neighbor to see if their problems can be resolved. So we have to be mindful of what's being streamlined here, and we have to have, as residents, alternatives to come together as neighbors, recognize our interest in preserving a quality of life, and work towards solving these problems. So some of these, what I see as potential flaws in the system, aren't exploited too heavily, or at least exploited in quiet.
Well, I appreciate the comments. This has been a great conversation. Are there any other comments or thoughts, or should we move on to land bank? Okay, well, not hearing any for the moment, I'll go ahead and provide the information on the land bank, and we can always come back if there are additional questions. Yeah.
I sent you a text or a whatever you call that, a chat.
Oh, okay. Do you want to tell me about it, Claire? Or?
Well, I just said that I'm a long-term realtor, and there is no question that the type of infill that goes in will substantially affect property values of not just the abutting, but a larger area of surrounding homeowners. They should have a voice in that process. A by right option will give them no voice. And if you're actually trying to notify neighbors, you must include those letters. The signs almost always fall down, they get rained on, they're placed where they're difficult to see, not always on purpose, but that method of notification is very ineffective just to put a sign in the yard. I didn't say this in the chat, but I just went through a 75-day process for conditional use. It was long, it was tedious, staff was extremely helpful, and I think I speak for the buyer and myself. We would have had it no other way. We encouraged the neighborhood response. We met with some neighbors. It went through, but they needed that opportunity to find out more about what was planned next to them. Just my 2 cents.
No, thank you very much for that. Yeah. Anyone else? Thoughts, questions? Okay, well, I'll give you something else to think about. And this is the land bank proposal. I'll do full screen, so hopefully you can see it a little bit better. So again, this is one of the recommendations coming out of the Places for People plan. So what is a land bank? Well, a land bank in general, it is an entity, it's a government entity that's focused on the conversion of land to productive use. And typically this is vacant land, abandoned land, tax delinquent land. So here's an example, site that Habitat for Humanity did, but one that could very well meet that definition, which is, the property on the left, it's overgrown, it's got a lot of debris on it. Later on, it's redeveloped into a home. So we've looked at 9 different communities. There are land banks in the area. I think we see Little Rock, Omaha, Kansas City, Wyandotte County, all the way out to New Orleans. We looked at a variety of different land banks. We looked at them for how are they organized, what's their composition, what are their priorities, how do they conduct their operations, what do they do? In general, what we found is that the board members are appointed by elected officials, that the land banks either do in-house rehab or they do partner with a partner to do the housing rehab. And that in general, they have a focus on revitalization, affordable housing, and increasing home ownership. We also found that in general, that there's a subsidy that's required for land banks. None of the land banks makes money or is able to fund itself, and that the staffing can vary. And of course, that varies based on their mission, their inventory of property that they're working with, what their responsibilities are. So what's proposed for Wichita is a land bank. In the state of Kansas, land banks are an entity that's allowed by the state, and the state sets what authorities and powers they've got. They have the ability to request abatement of special assessment and back taxes. They can't do it on their own, but they have the ability to request it. They have the ability to manage and maintain property, so keep them mowed, keep them cleared up, to sort through ownership and title issues, and to focus attention on revitalization. And really, these are all things that local governments can do, but in this case, the advantage of a land bank is that it's an organization, an entity, people who are specifically focused on this. In terms of the proposal, we've got a number of different draft documents that have been put together. They're available on the website, wichita.gov/places for people. There you can find the draft ordinance that would create one, draft bylaws, draft policies, and frequently asked questions. In terms of the mission statement, that it would promote the revitalization of neighborhoods consistent with Places for People plan through management and transfer of properties that are deemed underutilized. So the ordinance would establish a land bank with 7 members on the Board of Trustees. They would each be appointed by one of the council members, and it would allow for the creation of advisory committees as needed. Those would be based on neighborhood geography. It could be based on maybe the type of work that's being done, and that the focus of it would be on the geography of the established central area. But in addition, there would be the ability for the land bank to work with properties that are underutilized or distressed in other areas of the city if there was a need or a good opportunity. In terms of what a land bank can do, any purchase, sale, or transfer of property by the land bank must be approved by the city council. So this would not be an organization that would be on its own. All of those would have to be submitted by way of a recommendation from the Board of Trustees to the City Council. The land bank in many ways would be advisory to the City Council. And it's very important for you to know that a land bank is not urban renewal. State law does not provide for any use of eminent domain by a land bank. So they cannot force someone to sell a property. In terms of how property would come into the land bank or go out of it, the process that's proposed is that the applicant would submit a proposal to the land bank, which would then be reviewed by the Board of Trustees with a recommendation then provided to the City Council if they felt like the action was of good merit. In terms of policies and procedures, again, focus on the ECA. The priorities would match similar to what other communities have, which is affordable housing, neighborhood revitalization. And it's not just limited to housing, but also the opportunity for retail, commercial work, or open space if warranted. So a variety of different uses. The land bank that's envisioned, the proposal is that it would be very limited in terms of its capacity because, again, the operations would have to be subsidized and we don't see a significant amount of funding for it. So the amount of properties that can be maintained by it would be very limited, that they would have to be targeted strategic acquisitions, so working with partner organizations to identify good candidates, perhaps before acquisition. And that, again, there would be an application process for any property sale or transfer, and that the City Council would approve all of those. In terms of questions, we do have a frequently asked questions document that's available on the project website. There you can find answers to questions about that we're covering much of the information right now. If any questions come up, you can find it there. In terms of steps with this one, again, we're going to the DABs, collecting input. We'll provide the feedback, summary of the feedback to the City Council report, and update on that. And then we'll determine next steps from there. But we do know that an ordinance needs to be passed by the City Council in order to create it. But it's a whole different thing also to staff it and set up funding for it. So each one of those is a separate step. So with that, that's a very brief overview of the land bank proposal. And, are there any questions or thoughts on that? Okay, well, I guess seeing none, I guess if anyone has any thoughts or any questions, you think about it, you're going to bed tonight and you think, oh, I wish I'd asked that, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. In terms of next steps, again, we're soliciting for comments and questions. So any thoughts, we've had some really good discussion, gotten some great thoughts here tonight. But if you have any later on, or want to encourage folks, please have them submit through a variety of different ways. Here's what we're looking at, and we'll probably go in April-ish to the City Council with just an update on where we are, and then ultimately Planning Commission and City Council.
Hey, Scott, can you go back to that slide with the contact information? Gerald is wanting to write. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And again, you can find this information at wichita.gov/places for people. If you only write down one thing, as long as you get the website, you can find everything else there. Oops. All right. Well, everyone, thanks so much for the time. I know this is a lot to consider, so I appreciate your time and the questions and the comments. And again, if you have anything, please do follow up with me. It'd be great to hear from you.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate your thoroughness and your willingness to listen and take the feedback. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good night, everyone.
You too. So now we'll move on to the board agenda. Are there any topics, reports, announcements that anyone would like to share?
I was contacted by a neighbor who is in need of some rental assistance. And she said that the Sedgwick County line that she was supposed to call, Sedgwick County hotline, has been disabled, and that Catholic Charities doesn't have funding anymore. So she's looking to find some help with rent. I know there's some opportunities that came in recently, but I read something today about some of them not being available yet. And she has a short time to go before her rent is due. Well, she says that tomorrow is her deadline.
Rich, has she checked with House of Hope or the Salvation Army?
She has not, that I know of.
And then what about United Way? Because I believe they still have a fund that's helping people with rent. They were working with Wichita Community Foundation to provide funding for people who were struggling with rent.
Okay, I'll just have her call 211.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That'll be good.
Do you know, Rich, has she had her finances impacted by the pandemic?
Yeah, she was actually in the hospital with COVID.
Then she should look into the Wichita Emergency Rental Assistance Program. The city is providing rental assistance up to 12 months for people who qualify. I don't know the income guidelines off the top of my head, but all people have to do is document and demonstrate a loss of income because of COVID. That can be increased childcare costs, medical expenses, less hours at work, whatever. And the city is paying rent forward up to 12 months. People also have to have a notice from their landlord that they are at risk of being evicted and they have late fees due. But have her, let me see if I can get the website. Have her definitely look into that. That's an online application.
David, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, I just wanted to address a couple of comments that were made at the beginning of the meeting. First and foremost, as district advisory members and even those who are applying for the vacant city council seat, one of the things that we need most in District 3 is discernment. And I was reached out by many of people via email and phone calls, and I didn't think that it was wise to have any foreknowledge of any of the candidates. So I abstained from any phone calls or any emails from any candidates. And so I really came into the meeting with an unbiased opinion. I'm actually new to the district advisory board, so I didn't have a lot of contact with Cindy prior to this, or Jared. And, based upon my score, and I thought I was very impartial, 68% of the people that I scored fell right in the middle of the scoring bracket. And so therefore, I think that my scoring was actually very impartial. There were no super high candidates and there were 0 super low candidates. So to come at the district advisory board to say that we were impartial of our scoring, but obviously, I don't know what else to say, but based upon the scoring that I did, 68% of the candidates fell right in the middle. And if anybody else wants to talk with me offline or get with me later, I do believe my votes were fair and impartial. Thank you.
Do we know what process goes on in 2 weeks? How progressed, or how we determine the next process? Do we have a vote of 3 and then a flip of a coin, or do we go for 2 more weeks and vote for 2 more, or what is the process? Or where can I find the process for this operation?
I am not sure if the process is published anywhere. I know council will go through another round of 5 votes at their next meeting, which is going to be March 16th, as they do not have a meeting on the 9th. I did not hear, I wasn't sure if there still isn't a majority person, somebody selected by majority vote. I don't know if they go on to do that 1 more week or if they decide based off of a coin flip on the 16th.
Excuse me, Maddie.
Yeah.
I talked with Jennifer Magana today. So she said they're going to do on the 16th 5 more votes until they get 4. And if they don't, then they'll extend it to the next city council meeting, which means that they'll do 5 more votes. And if it still stays like it is 1, 2, and 3 votes for 3 different people, then she doesn't even know. They don't. They'll probably have to pull something out of a hat with maybe 2 red and 1 black piece of something, backgammons or something. She don't even know. They haven't even. They're gonna have to change the ordinance, which I'm surprised they never figured that there may be a 3-way tie or something when you got 6 people. But anyhow, so that's what it's going to do. So we're going to be without a city councilor for another maybe 3 or 4 weeks, which is sad. I told Jennifer that this just isn't right. I mean, we've already been without a city councilor since January 1st, and quite honestly, probably a month or 2 before then, as you probably are well aware. So District 3, we're getting crapped on again over here, and we need to do something. Something needs to happen, and someone needs to make, but they won't go with the one who has 3. Going to have to be 4, so someone's going to have to move some votes. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, George.
You're welcome.
Is there any other discussion? Any announcements from anyone's neighborhoods?
No, I don't have any questions.
Thanks, Daisy.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I second it.
I second it.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion to adjourn and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll see you April 7th.
All right, everybody have a great night.
Have a good night.
See you guys later.